Snowden once said something that I'm very curious to get your thoughts on. He said, I only have one fear in doing all of this, that people will see these documents and shrug. That they'll say, we assume this was happening and don't care. The only thing I'm worried about is that I'll do all this to my life for nothing. From your perspective, what's been the fallout from the breaking of the PRISM story? I took a look at it. There's a bunch of stalled lawsuits, some preliminary court rulings. There was, of course, the passing of the USA Freedom Act in 2015. Some people say it kind of repealed a lot of the government powers that led to the PRISM excesses. Some people say it didn't really quite go as far as it should have. From your perspective, has enough been done? Do people care enough about this issue? Do they really understand the nature of the threat with this kind of program?
I think yes and no. Obviously, Snowden shared that fear with me before we began publishing, and it put on me a great sense of responsibility to do everything I could to make sure that this story wouldn't be ignored. And everything I did, a lot of what I did, in fact, was designed to, the way we kind of published one story after the next, took a very confrontational approach with the government that created a kind of drama that forced people to pay attention. I tried to be as deliberate as I could be in ensuring that this wouldn't be ignored, or it wouldn't be just a 1 week story or something. And I think we did succeed. I mean, if you look at how much media attention this leak got compared to others, dominated headlines for months. And again, not just in the United States, but in many countries around the world. I just want to clarify one thing, which is when we say PRISM, the PRISM program is one of the programs that we unveiled. This was the way in which the U.S. government had been coercing big tech companies to turn over enormous amounts of data about their users without any search warrant or protection or safeguard of any kind. The very first program that we reported, though, before we revealed PRISM, was a program where the U.S. government was collecting the phone records of all American citizens by the hundreds of millions with no search warrant, that revealed with whom everybody was speaking, where they were when they were speaking, for how long, that presented this very vivid picture of every individual citizen's life that allowed the NSA and the FBI to create a dossier on individual citizens. And that program has been repeatedly ruled illegal and unconstitutional by federal courts and was struck down. Now, on the one hand, you are right that the walls of the NSA did not come crashing down upon it. The NSA is still open. It still spies on people. The changes in American domestic law have been more minimal than major. I wouldn't say that it's been trivial, but it's certainly nowhere near what I would have hoped it would have been. But I think we knew when we did this reporting that wasn't going to be the change. The change wasn't going to be that the American government was suddenly going to decide that what they were doing was wrong, because this was a government that believed it had the power to do this. What we wanted to do was to make people understand that whatever beliefs they had about privacy on the internet were completely illusory, that you could not overestimate the extent of how much these governments had obtained the ability and then exercise the ability to spy on everything that you're doing online. And obviously every year that goes by, we do more and more online. And that did result in a lot of changes. I'll just give you two examples that I think are the biggest. Number one is, before we did the reporting, almost nobody had heard of and nobody was using any kind of encryption, which is a mathematical device, a wall to keep governments or non-government actors from being able to monitor what you were doing. In fact, when Snowden contacted me, one of the first demands he had of me was that I use encryption. And even though I was a journalist working in sensitive national security issues with WikiLeaks, I hadn't really used encryption very much. I'd used it a little bit, but nowhere near as sophisticated as he wanted. And now you look at the number of people who use encryption, not even because they choose to, but oftentimes because it's embedded within software products. You don't even know any longer that you're using encryption. If you speak on WhatsApp, which is the most popular app in many major countries, it has end-to-end encryption. That is all the result of the Snowden reporting that created this understanding that companies, if they wanted to compete, couldn't be seen as turning over people's data to the government. They had to prove to their users that they were willing to provide privacy, real protection against U.S. spying. So that was one thing. It was just the consciousness raising that in turn resulted in behavioral changes that made it much more difficult for governments to spy. And then the second one was this pressure that was put on big tech companies, where big tech companies constantly, as part of their marketing, tout these privacy protections that aren't impenetrable, but that are very real. You have apps like Signal and Telegram that constantly are trying to improve the impenetrability of their technology. You have kind of an arms race between hackers on the one hand, defensive hackers who are creating encryption, in the U.S. government trying to invade it on the other. So and then I'd say a third thing, which is internationally, it really changed how countries deal with one another as well. I mean, in Brazil, for example, it was a huge story. I did a lot of the reporting in Brazil. There was a lot of reporting on how the U.S. was spying on Brazilians. And Brazil created alliances with other countries that said, we're going to create our own cyber optics network and our own internet network that doesn't have to transgress the United States, because of the fact that when you put the physical infrastructure in the United States, it makes it easier for the NSA to intercept it. So these changes may not be as dramatic as, say, a major law or a constitutional amendment, but in a lot of ways they were effective. At the same time, the U.S. security state has been at this for many, many decades, and they understand that when people get concerned about their power, their abuse of power, their privacy, things of that nature, they know how to elevate the fear levels of the population. So they say, oh, maybe Al-Qaeda is not threatening, but now we have ISIS. Now we have Russia. Now we have this group and that group that is threatening you, and you need to give us the tools to protect you from it, to enable us to spy on people. And it's constantly this pushback in public opinion about getting people to care about privacy versus getting them scared enough to be willing to give up privacy rights in the name of being protected.
There's also been a big push since then. I don't know how connected the two are, but with privacy laws in general. So things like the GDPR or all the privacy laws that you're seeing all around the world that impose way more constraints on governments and on large corporations. I don't know if you've looked into that area. I mean, us as lawyers, it's an area of law that's booming, that we need to really master, because if companies want to acquire personal information now, they need to comply with all these laws. I don't know if you've looked at it from the perspective of actually functionally protecting privacy, because sometimes I wonder if it really has that effect, because when you take a look at the prevalence of hacking, and the government's just being able to play the national security card and find exceptions all over the place, I wonder whether or not it really moves the needle. But definitely it has, in the last few years, these laws have also come to the forefront.
Yeah, and there was none of this before, or very little of this before the Snowden reporting, because people weren't really conscious of this. I think one important thing is to kind of avoid this binary framework, which is either we have total privacy and the government's locked out completely, or we have none, the government can invade everything. Like I said, I think it's this push and pull. One of the important things to remember, is that a lot of our privacy doesn't actually go through the government. It really goes through big tech companies. And especially in Europe, but even more so now, increasingly in North America, there's this understanding that if you want to protect citizens, and you want to protect consumers, and you want to protect individual rights, the channel, the kind of road runs through big tech. And you see a lot of these antitrust actions, especially with the EU, that are trying to weaken big tech. And then if you go and look at whenever there's measures in the United States, I think it's so notable, that are designed to break up big tech or to reduce its monopoly power, the people who stand up most quickly and vocally to defend big tech and to say, no, we need big tech strong, are people affiliated with the U.S. security state, ex-CIA and FBI and Homeland Security operatives, because the more power is centralized in big tech, the more the U.S. security state can have a place where they can collect information in a very easy and centralized way. At the same time, these companies have a consumer incentive to prove to their customers that they are actually providing privacy, but also they get a ton of money from the government and can't alienate the U.S. government either. So, ever since the Snowden reporting, I would say it's just been this constant war on a PR level, on a legal level, on a technological level, about how much privacy we're going to have and how vulnerable we're going to be to governments. And there's things we can do as individuals too. Like I said, if you want to have a conversation and you want to protect yourself, from it, don't use Google or Facebook chats or Twitter DMs. Go and use encrypted apps like Signal, or even more advanced ones if you're a human rights activist. So a lot of these are about individual choices as well.